New moon is upon us. Welcome. Hello. Hi, how are you? Uh, to our strange little tap on the strange matters in the sky. Um, there's a new moon, there's an eclipse, there's a mini moon, there's a new space explorations set to, I don't actually remember if it's set off, but it is set to. Um, there's a lot going on. New moon in Libra. Um, an invisible solar, unseen to us solar eclipse, with a perfect, maybe not perfect, but ring of fire alignment. I believe it was like 89% or something. Um, with very minimal sight to us, except for Hawaii and South America's tip, but it also directly passes Easter Island and the ancient architecture of Stonehenge, amongst many other not amongst, but I think that connects to many other mounds or wood henges or uh, geo entropy filled places, geomantic places on the earth. And maybe those pullings of strings that we feel so tethered to. Uh, I think Stonehenge also lends itself to this understanding of the circle of ancestors, and acknowledging the life in all things, and like wood hinges within the same concept. It's very much like a circle of power, community, conjuring, like a portal to different worlds, but made up of pillars of thought. Um, and those can, especially in dreams, take embodiment in some form. Um, and ultimately, I think that's what covens are striving for. But trees also exist very much in that way. I do believe that outside of mushrooms, they're the closest aura to humans. I guess I can't necessarily know if somebody else validates that unless you tell me. Um, but yeah, we're surrounded by intelligent beings, cognizance and consciousness in many forms. And science is very much taking that and running with it, um, and discovering new things beyond AI, even, and micro brains and lab built brains and computing, which is some very interesting conversations uh, to consider. But I digress. New moon in Libra. It is also with Mercury, with Juno, with Black Moon, Lilith. It aligned with Pallas Athenian prior to being in Libra proper, with this interesting little cluster, perhaps this circle of well, exactly. There's a lot of uh, celestial bodies, not necessarily acknowledged as planets, um, that are named after these female ideologies or icons, and it's very much this circle of unseen ancestors, much like there's a number of female prophets or apostles that are sacrilege to speak of, but are still very much a huge part of the influence of where we are today, though in secret. And we see this a lot in magical circles, unfortunately. But they are the divine problem solvers. They may not get the credit for it, but they are the divine problem solvers, which is, I think, why the moon will attach to this energy, carry it forward, and move it with a lot of these interesting surprises. Um, eclipse. Oh, the mini moon. Or dwarf, little, what is it? Near Earth object. It's an asteroid, but it does fall into orbit around us. I found some interesting information about it. It's 33 feet wide, apparently like a school bus, but 33 feet in length or diameter or something like that, but 300,000 times smaller than our actual moon. And that numerology definitely excited me. Um, because though a smaller circle, it's also these magical threes are very much. this baseline of creation, or this baseline of reality. I think that's why you'll find narcissists triangulate information often, because it is kind of like an Uno reverse with energy, but it also is I think a blueprint to manifesting in a lot of ways. Um, this mini moon coming into orbit, the secondary moon, um, 100% I think will do the obvious things and change, the weight or wave poles of our own planetary fabrics that are woven together. I think it'll refract and reflect on, vibrations, be it sound or light, a little differently. In the same way that, a person in an empty room can change the way sound bounces off. Um, but in more digging of this, there are 2 other times that this has happened. Well, 2 other times recently that this has happened. It's not entirely, like, unheard of, right? It's not totally like, "Oh, whoa, this will never happen again." It will come back to see us in January next year, which will be important as well. But the last times that we've had a moon and for even or a secondary moon, and for an even longer orbit, because it'll only be here till, I wanna say November, was 2006 and 2020. And 100% the times characterized by these additional celestial weights have been characterized by a lot of political and social unrest, by warfare, by death, by death in mass, by assassination, um, by very incredibly pivotal things. Um, I think 2020 is probably a lot easier for us to remember that a lot of those things were coming up. Um, but it's actually really interesting if you Google major headlines of those periods of time. And not to plan for the worst, but we've done more with less, which is something to ultimately hold on to. As dark as things seem to have been in times like those, I definitely find some solace in that, being the kind of person I am. Uh, Sometimes you feel kind of made for this, kind of made for the crazy times. Uh, a ringleader of the circus, if you will. Um, I'm the thing that they're afraid of. Um, but so the mini moon is really interesting. I was actually trying to find um some very specific information about its orbit. And though I don't know how to plot celestial coordinates as of yet, I think perhaps that it entered our orbit in Aquarius. However, do know that it has a sort of horseshoe shaped rotational pattern, so that it could very well maybe have entered in Aries if that's the case. Um, which is kind of like the birth of this energy, like the energy that it carries when it walks in the room, right? Um, it's in the constellation of Draco, the dragon, near the dragon, which I also found very interesting. That triangulates with Ursa Minor and Ursa Major, I think. Um, but again, we have this triangulation um, that I think can redirect reality. It's very underdog vibes, but it's very like um, Brutus vibes as well, or can be. Let's see. There's also been a ton of solar flare spikes, which I also found very interesting because everybody gets really heated. Technology works less and less. Um, it's incredible waves over the earth, and though it does seem to be uh, the time that we're used to being colder, in a time where we're preparing for the holidays and things getting cold and da 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 da. These solar flares are very much adding to erratic thoughts, behavior patterns, etc. Um, it waves over. I wrote this down. It waves over a spacecraft, which was interestingly enough one of the only ways that we can see it because the other one went offline. I found that interestingly spooky and almost kind of desperate. Uh, and a satellite that's exploring Jupiter's moons, which is this other spatial exploration that's is set to move forward. So there's a lot of moon energy, and I know Jupiter has a ton of moons, and it's all of these different perspectives. And its relationship to Saturn and Neptune, and I think the expansiveness of intrusive thoughts, maybe even, that can be either liberating or debilitating, uh, I think is very much lending itself to this in these, these waves and these spikes and this tumultuousness. 100% that also relates to other major effects to be had or have had that we've had in the last couple of weeks, couple of days in the world. Um, Meditating on the geometry of this, I'm like trying to take this step by step, right? Meditating on the geometry of this, it's very much peeling back the layers of reality. It's very much breaking down and creating anew, which is again this dragon, this moon, these triangulations, Easter Island. Um, Peeling back layers of reality, and I think even a very real perspective of what the pentagram, pentacle, what have you, uh, can mean beyond the fear of inversion of spirituality, um, is actually really life giving and actually can be a symbol of conjuring if you think within this 4 point, the fifth point being sort of pulling it out of nothingness, pulling it out of the two-dimensional plane. Um, is where, like, I'm getting all of these lines, right? But so manifestation to a fault, which I think is 100% these solar flares. It's very much a new fan to what is it? Like solar meditations or whatever, solar gazing. Not that that's a bad thing. The sun and the moon also have their roles, and very much so. Me and the moon are like this. Me and the sun, we hang out, but like I guess me and the moon are just tighter. Uh, we have our spaces though. We have our needs, and I've heard that sun gazing breaks down DNA. And I don't necessarily that means it like obliterates, but I do think it's a pattern obliterator, while the moon very much sort of creates and adds to and perhaps avalanches patterns, which is also why we might find so much chaos or also clear thought. Love how those two things can exist in the same space. Um, da, 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 da. Um, there is this earthquake in Tonga, in what I heard being called a seduction zone, which I also found really beautiful because Lilith is very prominent in the cosmos, and is very much lending itself to this Libra configuration, um, which says a lot about the things that we really want to hold ourselves back from, the things that weigh us down rather than lift us up, the things that scare other people but liberate us. Again, those things with this with existing within those two spaces, whatever I just said 30 seconds ago too. Um the earthquake in Tonga, which was also it also had its ring of fire. But there's a ring of fire of earthquakes too that was like existing within the same time. How funny. Then we're finding this reflections, and then for Americans, obviously, I guess not just Americans, but Hurricane Helene, that we've just heard more of, I suppose, um, and its associations with like biblical end of times, which I find very interesting. Not that that's my boat to die on. But I find that very interesting because again, this breaking down of matter or this obliteration, uh, this pattern breakingness. I think what people think is the work of angels is actually the disassembling of matter. The result of a particle collision, right? And perhaps the way that matter exists in multiple places because of that. Um, kind of like kind of like the return button on a remote, if anybody remembers that, if that's still a thing. Um, where you could go back to the channel that you were on before. I suppose the association with that is if you were watching something naughty. Uh, but if that were to be our life in the blink of an eye, matter assembling and disassembling, I'm just like picturing it too. Um, be a shapeshifter, like what would that look like? Where would you end up? Um, what would be the ideal? What would be the fulfilling? Um, what would be where the wrongs are righted? And caveat butterfly effect. But I think that's also part of the exploration and part of the understanding. Um, da, 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 da. Yeah, I think that's my rant. But we're gonna pull some cards about this new moon and its mini moon friend and all of the energies that surround it, Black Moon Lilith, and such, that I think it has something significant to offer in alignment. Much like the Seven Sisters or the Power of Three or any group thought. What is it they say? A group of men is a clergy and a group of women is a coven. Hilarious. What's a group of queers? A party. I'm kidding. Although it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Oh gosh. Oh gosh. I remember meditating on this earlier, actually, and it made me very nauseous. So bear with me. Not to say I think there's terrible things coming. I think things will be difficult. Plans will change, such as life, but all for the better. All because we are being gifted an opportunity to re-navigate. I don't necessarily, I think it's also very important to say, I don't necessarily think all of this is just nature being beautiful. I absolutely think that there's powers that manipulate energies. Perhaps that is an aspect of the Coriolis effect. Perhaps. Ugh. Okay. Much like we're hanging out together, and there are cards in between us. Take 3 deep breaths. Tap into information that is at our frequency or resonance or higher, and that can assist us in understanding ourselves, the world, and the tools that help us navigate it. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Take a deep breath in and exhale. I actually lost count there, but I'm pretty sure that's 3. That felt like my own little solar flare and wave. That was interesting. Quite magnetic, quite interesting, lovely. And we've got, bottom of the deck, 10 of Wands. which is intensity, which is overwhelm, which is overload, which is burnout if it is not managed properly. However, if we alchemize these circumstances into something that you can utilize to your behest, then the Ten of Wands is creation, is levitation, is telepathy, is extreme, um, and intense and passionate, in the best way. It's the like fucking wave force that we push, man, um, and very palpably so. Um, that being the bottom of the governing, that being such an incredible initiation point. As bizarre as everything is, it's a powerful time to be alive. The Hierophant, the Hanged Man, and the Emperor, all major arcana. Interesting. Um, the Hierophant being the center, which is funny. I feel like, for sake of fair day, uh, being the Hanged Man is probably the last thing on a lot of people's mind. Um, because sure, it's sacrifice. Um, it's stillness. It's inversion. It's understanding. I think it, much like spinning, can solidify a focal point, um, while everything else turns around you. Um, the irony, especially of this, is it looks like he's also just suspended in space. The skies are clear. The skies are clear as day with this character, in stillness, with this character in meditation, with this character observing from an inversion, um, which is to say, questioning everything, which is to say, investigating, which is to say, uh, understanding the pertinence of the definitions of language being used, which is to say, defining doublespeak. This character is a fucking badass, um, and is not the doomsday prepper uh, of Faraday Wet Dreams, but is made for this. And I don't think anything can prepare you for the things that you really want in a very relatable and real world context. The way people are like, I really want to be ready for a dog, or I really want to be ready for a baby, or I'm going to get a house or a car when I'm ready for it. It is such a new experience. In fact, that as prepared as you think you may be, you'll never feel prepared for everything. And it becomes very clear after a while, that excuses will just fabricate out of thin air, to postpone these things. Um, Even for all that I know, find ways in which myself uh, and my habits still postpone the impression of pain or the assumption of pain, um, only to find that the most painful part was the postponing, and the procrastination of it. So regardless, don't dwell too far on what ifs, but immerse yourself in the feeling of what is, and that will carry you so much farther. Um, Oof, I'm gonna save that for later for me too, in the back pocket. The Hierophant is very much that, is a rule setter, a boundary maker, an establisher, of what is an inch or a mile. Um, a creator, projector, a manifester, generator, a holy space, and open space, all its own. I say holy because he's glowing, right? But it's very much like its own open, endless portal. Um, Regardless of how you would define holy. I like to think it's lots of holes. um, Lots of portals. Um, Interesting. We go 5 Hierophant, Hangman, 4 Emperor. Um, as much as that may feel like taking a step back, think of it a lot more like finding resolution, like finding baseline. Ooh, I love this. There's a sculpture that is, I don't know what it's called, honestly. I'll have to find it. Maybe I'll leave it in the comments. But I was thinking about this the other day. Is this sculpture of a character that looks like it's walking, right? And so you kind of like, I don't know, at least I want to mimic this shape and found myself sort of playing with my bones, I guess, in that shape. And as much as I think at first it looks like a character moving forward, I think because of the way it ultimately sits, that it's more like leaning back on that back foot, which there's a lot of power there. That's how you throw a punch. That's how I don't know, sling a harpoon, how you shoot an arrow, from this line of strength, right? Uh, and I think, as overlooked as that might be, or as inobvious, there's so much to be learned in such a simple gesture, right? Um, and there's a lot of things that are moving very forward, very fast. Um, I think it's very easy to get caught up in that. The world does not want us to stop and think. That is why we are surrounded by anti Muslim sentiments because we cannot make room, capitalism cannot make room for prayer, for knowingness of self. Um, and Muslims pray 5 times a day. So, what a threat to capitalism! Oh my God. I believe in 2006, the last time we had a mini moon was when Hussein was assassinated. Actually, uh, fun facts. Let's see what else. The emperor, the emperor, the emperor. The emperor speaks less than the hierophant. Um, but he offers more. Speaks less, but he offers more. I think his message gets farther because he tries, like he doesn't force it. There's this bird on the top, right? And he's caught in this wave, like these glares, and it's very much carrying this message on light, on sound, on I don't know, the harpsichord of the universe. If you've ever seen or meditated to solfeggio frequencies, I do think it assists in our ability to see how things are all tied together. Um, but I digress. Let's see, it also moves from red to purple. I think even in a lot of general cults, that's a step up in some way, shape, or form. And outside of cultic ideology, purples are very regal. Um, it's about the wealth you create rather than like I think red makes me think of marriage too. And that is uh like marrying into wealth isn't necessarily creating your own wealth, is what I want to say. I'm sorry if that's offensive. Um, but it's more about sharing than it is emanating, I think is a more aligned way to say that. Um, da, 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 da. Although I guess emanating is a form of giving too. But at a certain point, it's less about your partnership and more about the world, uh, and more about your truth. Um, Da, 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 da. And that is 4. That is safe space. That is an organization of this 10 of Wands. That is understanding the basis of Easter Island. And understanding that the trees are alive. So let's pull numbers and see what comes of this. What is the most human way to channel these energies? Because we're dealing with a lot of not human forces. Don't you think? Oof. Let's see. We dropped a bunch. We're keeping it. Bam. Bam. We're going to draw them all. Because I dropped 3. I'm going to drop the exact amount, actually. So we've got as above, so below, perhaps. Bottom of the deck, Queen of Swords. Queen of Spades. Ooh, okay. Give me a second. Because there's a lot of worry, there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of back and forth. I get like that came up earlier too with like what did I say? Something about particles bouncing around in timelines. Like if what you were saying changed every time you blinked your eye, um, of course that can get overwhelming. But we are bouncing particles, that move until they establish some sort of reasonable truth, until they find what they need, I suppose. The Queen of Swords is very knowing of that, or at least very observant of that, tries to move within that. Um, and if you don't know what you want, that's okay. That's all the more reason to explore and to create. And maybe that's the Queen of Spades' fault, or like falling short at that point is anybody's frustration with themselves because they've been too subject to the real world and lost their Peter Pan. Uh, in which case, I love that analogy because even Peter Pan, at least in like the old like stage play on VHS that I fell in love with, sews his shadow to his foot. He sews his doubt as some sort of not his doubt, his erraticness as some sort of uh, unified aspect of himself, this mischievousness, right? The bottom of this is a king of diamonds, a 3 of swords, of spades, and a 2 of clubs. On top of this is a king of spades, a 10 of hearts, and a 3 of diamonds. So understand that the worry is on the outskirts of this. This is the periphery rather than this inner knowing of clearing a path so that you can more comfortably associate with the things that you love and the things that you actually want. This is like making space or for your child to play, making space and making time for your mind to play, for your mind to ask questions, for your mind to entertain possibilities and curiosities. Um, to try something new. I feel like even if that's something that you've just been meaning to do, like I talked to a friend of mine not that long ago, um, who was like, "Oh shit, my dad's been telling me to do that forever." I guess I'm really glad. I guess that's what I should do. Like, I'm glad that this came around. And sometimes it's exactly that. I mean, shit, I'm working on some stuff too. We all are. Uh, Excuse my language. I'm working on that too. Um, I think things do come around full circle. I think oftentimes it can take the long way around. But I think this 10 of hearts at the top and this 3 of spades um, very much will lend itself to being able to cut through these heat waves and these pressure waves that are upon us. It's just about your understanding of your alignment. And if you feel tugged across a spectrum of things that seem to need you but don't feel fulfilling, then yeah, uh, it leaves for some holes. That visually, if time has a rubber band and you pull one of these strings, one of these rubber bands so far into what you think, it should be and needs to be right now with impatience, um, and not understanding the journey, or the means to the end, too taut, and that rubber band will snap. And I think time and I think goals is very much like this. I think perhaps this is also why the new moon passed along some information while it was in Virgo, because Virgo is very much into categorizing, into organizing, into scheduling. And they're so great at it. We love them for it. But I wonder if perhaps, despite as good as you can be at that, if time still needs to be acknowledged as this jelly-like substance, as this viscous entity, in the same way that we've learned space has been. Um, so there's a lot of weird shit going on. Um, King of Spades is clearing. The Queen of Spades is understanding of what needs to go in that space. The King of Diamonds is being able to communicate what you want to see to yourself before you see it, and understanding that, because I think the worry and the anxiety comes from this peripheral need to see to believe, um, rather than to know and to feel. And I think that's that can be the difference too, of like when our mind is overacting and we're like, oh, shadow figures, I'm too tired, I'm da 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 da. That's not to say that every time we see a shadow figure, it isn't real or it isn't there. Um, but I do feel like they stay when I do move. Um, but conversely, you can feel eyes on you without ever seeing them. Um, when something is watching you or when something is looking. Um, and that is very much just that visceral wave that you're very that you can be very sensitive to. I feel like cameras also very much have that, which not the same auras as trees or mushrooms, but there's a different understanding there. So thank you, Siri. Let's see. Last card that fell. Bottom of the deck, 7 of diamonds. This is a baseline alignment, with terms that we can understand. This is. I read something earlier about the the capability to qualify certain astral bodies as planets, outside of the planets that we know, right? So theoretically there's maybe like 14, but the same is true of a lot of things, and their willful ignorance in uh, corporatization, and commodification, um, but also I suppose for simplicity's sake. But the same thing it can be said of chakras, and this understanding that there are 7 when there are in fact over 108, let alone thousands of nadis. Uh, but all of this understanding If you notice, it's also very clearly, squarely in my chest and in my confidence. I can say it with my chest. And the Seven of Diamonds is very much, I think, understanding the gifts that you have. Because if you notice, he's not asking, he's offering. Um, Seven is prime, so it's not necessarily something you can see, but it is something you can feel. Again, like being watched, again, like the solar eclipse, which is something that does influence so much. It often makes me think of ancestors, which now there's a scientific proof that we have. I think it was 30 something generations of ancestors, just in our cellular memory and biology in our body now, which is wild, but also comforting in that you are perhaps absolutely and actually never alone, and have far more resources and understanding than you assume there to be. And that is an understanding that the Queen of Spades, when in full confidence, understands. That is the space that the King of Swords allows one to hold, so that your Three of Swords, Three of Spades desire and Heart of Hearts notion can fully emerge and fully erupt. Um, I shouldn't say erupt too loud because who knows. Um, the most human way to go about this is to stop comparing yourself to things that you see, and start understanding how the things around you influence you so that it can put you in better alignment with that which you want to be, want to see, want to resonate in capacity, right? And giving faith to the unlearning of some capacities that we have been programmed into. Um, I think that's where some weight on the Ten of Wands can lend its can gather, is not our own expectations, but perhaps the expectations around us. Comparison is a killer. Oh my. Comparison is a killer. Yeah, okay. Let's see. We'll let that be. Rock the hangman. In stillness, not necessarily in sacrifice. This doesn't have to hurt. This doesn't have to be painful. This can be really incredible and really surprising and really beautiful. It can be a wild ride. Can be an interesting roller coaster. Um, and I hope exactly that for you. I hope that it allows us to lend a lot of understanding to our Venus because we will need it, uh, and allow all of this to move slowly and take it day by day. Yeah. Small scale, big changes. I will let you meditate on that. Until next time, my friends, party on. Happy new moon. Uh, and I wish you all of the stars. Keep an eye out for them. Thank you.